If you found this, time's up. A close-up of crumpled fingers and ticket number 132. The hum of the bus station. The announcer's voice. Primorsk, 1415. The bus engine revving up. In frame, a note. Go. I'll help. The note was 5 words in a stubborn hand. If you found this, time's up. The paper smelled like rain. The station smelled like diesel and boiled coffee. I was tightening a hinge on a staff door, thinking about the plastic container of buckwheat that had become my definition of stability, when my fingers brushed a wet envelope in a bin labeled Lost Unwanted. Inside lay a ticket with a fat black number, 132, and a square of paper that added, Go, I'll help. I slid the envelope into the inside pocket of a coat bought for 100 and a joke, traded my coins for the cheapest coffee, and stared at the reflection of a man with low shoulders and sleeves one life too long. The felt-tip blessing on the cup bled, Have a good trip. The bus to Primorsk coughed awake, and I understood the ordinary alchemy of certain days. Not money, not miracles. Sometimes a life tips because a scrap of paper chooses a number, and the number chooses you. The driver, a heavy man with a gray mustache and prayer beads on his keyring, squinted at the ticket like a rare stamp that had outlived its country. "Where'd you dig this up?" he asked. I reached for my wallet. He waved me on. "Settle up on the way back." I took a window seat and watched the city yield to fields, then to a straight horizon. At the first stop, a woman fought a bag. I lifted it. At the next, a boy dropped his phone. I caught it. At the third, an old man dozed onto my shoulder. When the clouds split, the sea drew a thin slate line. The last stop stood in a wind that had recently argued with gulls. On the shelter wall, someone had scratched, "Don't be afraid, the sea won't drown." The envelope had a secret, a thinner slip glued to its side. Pristanskaya Street, number 7. Ask for Galina. I felt like a letter being responsibly delivered by an underpaid universe. Pristanskaya was a short, wind-bit street. The door of number 7 opened after my second knock. A woman in her 60s, the color of past summers, looked at the ticket in my hand and said with the relief of a ritual that still works, "That's my number, 132. Come in." The apartment smelled of dill and salt. On the table sat a stack of envelopes tied with linen tape, and by the wall a suitcase tattooed with stickers. She ladled soup like a first answer. "Who were you expecting today?" I asked. She nodded at a photograph. A boy in a blue shop coat by a workbench, smiling like terms were finally fair. "His friend," she said, "or his neighbor, someone who can say, 'I remember him.'" I remembered a sight years ago, a footing crumbling, my hand on a beam, his boot scraping back to balance. Then our lives split. She said, "His name was Ilya. He worked in Petrovich's shop. After the accident, he left for the port. Then the letters stopped. Petrovich kept the shop. Come, ticket 132 finishes what it starts." The workshop hid in a timber shed with a fresh sign, Quay Cooperative. Sawdust sweetened the air. Petrovich, compact and careworn, lifted his eyes from a plane and measured me the way a craftsman measures stock, grain, warp, potential. "He's here by the ticket," Galina said. Petrovich nodded and moved a stool closer to the bench. "Hold, pass, listen. Don't interrupt the wood when it answers. The first board warmed under my palm like a word returned. That night I slept under the roof, iron bed, green shade, window to a small cove. The number 132 pressed into my ribs and turned to nerve. Morning brought hammers. Petrovich stood over a joint, and beside him, a man my age with a thin scar by his temple. You don't remember me, but I remember you. 13 years ago, you hauled a beam. He smiled. Seems your ticket had other opinions. His name was Nikita. He ran the cooperative with Petrovich. By noon, he asked, "Stay?" I answered by sanding until the grain shone. Days took on the shape of usefulness. My fingers learned a grammar that sand teaches to skin. The inner monologue that kept me awake ran out of objections. I carried the envelope like permits to a future that had funnily agreed to lease me space. On Sundays, I walked to the last stop, sat on the bench where the wind salted your lips, and listened to the argument the town had with the sea. Sometimes people arrived holding a ticket and an address. Sometimes no one did, and I left a neat envelope at the station kiosk like a seed. One afternoon, the driver with beads peered in and stood undecided. "So, we're settling up?" I pulled folded bills from my pocket. He didn't take them. He said, "Already got my cut," nodding toward the water. "You get me." I pressed him a fresh envelope. "If you found this, time's up. Go, I'll help." Destination? Whichever answers. Winter arrived like a letter without a return address. Quiet, intent. We built a long table for the library, the kind a town lives at when it forgets how to talk and needs furniture to remember. Evenings I sat on the quay until breath ghosted. Galina sometimes joined me. "A ticket is a bell," she said. "The answer rings inside a person." Mine had begun to ring.
In spring, I rode back to my old station. The lost unwanted bin had been replenished with the loose change of other people's days. I hung a modest sign above the cashier's window, "If you're stuck, ask about ticket 132, and slid 3 envelopes under the glass, addressed to places that had agreed to be kind: Primorsk, Quiet Bay, New Station. The clerk with glitter boots raised an eyebrow. "Public service?" "Maintenance," I said. When I returned, Nikita had photographs: the library table taking light, a blue cabinet with true hinges, a girl at the plane, jaw set. On the back of one, "Thank you." I think about the day I left. If I had stayed, would anything have split? The sea would still refuse to drown. Maybe I would have kept my careful life. But I had a ticket I hadn't bought, and an address I hadn't chosen, and somehow they pronounced my name louder than I was used to hearing it. Now I own a desk I built and a habit of silence that fits. There's a sign by the cashier. I push an envelope forward and say, "If you found this, time's up. Go. I'll help." Evenings, when the cooperative drowses, we lean against the wall and listen to boards release the day. Ticket 132 wasn't taking me anywhere exotic. It carried me back to myself by way of other people. It turned miracle into craft: straight seams, grain, patience. I know where the linen tape is, where the scissors sleep, where Galina keeps her jar of bay leaves. The first sound in the morning is the kettle. The second is the plane clearing its throat. A week later, a narrow-shouldered kid hovered with an envelope. "This from the sign," he said. "Not sure it's mine." We walked down to the water. I set the plane in his hands so they could remember the difference between gripping a fear and holding a tool. "What if I fail?" he asked. "Then the road succeeds," I said. "Sometimes the road is the job." That evening, I saw him at the stop with a waiting suitcase. The bus side open, he lifted a hand. I lifted one back. One Thursday, Galina opened the stickered suitcase, unclaimed tickets, letters to no one. We read a few aloud. One said, "If this reaches you, it's because I didn't run this time." We put it back. Some promises prefer to be available. The town learned our small ceremony. The librarian sent a note about varnish catching light. The driver left a thermos on the step. For the post office that remembers the heart has forwarding addresses. Petrovich, who talks little, nodded at a finished door and said, "True." The word weighed enough to dent the floor. By summer, ticket 132 had turned from a found object into a verb. Once a week, I still walk to the quay and sit long enough for gulls to forgive me for being decorative. Once a week, I leave an envelope at the station. The clerk stamps, "Good trip." Once a week, someone asks, "Is this real?" And I answer, "Real enough to start." The ticket that carried me a few hours down the road now carries other people to the edge where a decision learns its legs. If you want instructions, I have none. If you need a name, say your own. If you need change, check your pocket for a small bell. Mine still rings, passing a hardware store, hearing boats bump, finding linen tape where it belongs. On the station wall, the nail scratch of advice has faded, but I repeat it when clouds argue and the horizon needs holding. Don't be afraid. The sea won't drown. Once, late, the wind found the plane, and it made a shy sound. "Hear that?" Nikita said. "I do," I answered. We stood in the wood dust dusk. Somewhere a bus exhaled. Somewhere a door learned its hinge. Somewhere a stranger touched a number and counted to 10. And here, in the quiet that happens only after work, I understood that my life hadn't been rescued by luck so much as corrected by a line drawn straighter. The ticket didn't make me someone else. It returned me to the person I once promised I could be, then taught me the craft of staying.